So, first step of creating this design is to create our basic geometric shape in Illustrator. It can be tempting with this to try and make something too complicated and too kind of standalone at this stage, where you want it a very simple shape with a couple of interesting lines through it. This will make more sense when we start cutting up the image in the next stage. So we're going to start this off in Illustrator so we get nice clean vector lines. So if we go to File and New, just create a default document. I'm going to work in landscape for this. Okay, so the design I'm going to go for is something fairly simple, kind of a star shape with a couple of extra details in it. So start with the polygon tool, which is hidden in the shapes menu. If you want any of these rollouts, just hold down your select button and it will pop out. Okay, click anywhere on the page and it will bring up the polygon dialog box. So, because we want a triangle, I'm going to set this to 3 sides. Just go for 250 point. It doesn't really matter at this stage what size we get. Okay, so we've got a triangle there. I'm just going to check that I've got no fill in there, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, and then I'm going to Alt, click, left, and then right again, so I've duplicated that object. The other way to do that would be to copy and paste it in place. Then I'm going to go to Object, Transform, and Reflect it. Okay, if we set this to horizontal, you should see a change now. Okay, and I'm going to give it a few taps down until I've got a kind of star shape. Something like that should do for this. Okay, I'm just going to move this back up the page a bit. The next step is I want a line running from top to bottom. Now I've got Smart Guides turned on. Just check in the View menu there. If you haven't got that turned on, tick that there and Control U. So that should now, you'll know it's working because you'll get kind of green highlights every time you get over a snappable point. So I'm going to run a line from top to the bottom of the star. So next I want another triangle inside this one. So I'm going to select that, Alt, click the direction arrow again to duplicate it, tap it back into place. Then holding down Shift and Alt to scale in proportion. I'm going to try and intersect the lines of the bigger triangle, so it will require a little bit of tweaking. So yeah, that's Alt Shift to scale in proportion and then drag any of the handles in. So that's looking pretty close. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, see if I can get it any neater. Again, it's not hugely important, but the neater you work at this stage, the better the end result. There we go, that'll do for now. Okay, so just a couple of extra details to add into this now. I'm going to draw a point starting from the corner, and I want it to pass through this point here and continue into the triangle. So I've drawn my line using the pen tool, and then I'm going to select the end using the selection tool, which is the white arrow, and the shortcut for that is A. And I'm just going to pass through so it intersects that point. Doesn't matter if it goes too far through the triangle at the other side, we want to make it at least past this halfway point. So that's looking about right. We could either draw another line using the pen tool, or we could cheat and reflect it. So if we select that object and then choose reflect from this palette here, it might be hidden under the rotate tool. The shortcut for that is O. And then if you hold your mouse over this central line we've got here and then click the Alt key, now at the moment it's set to horizontal, but if we set that to to vertical, sorry, it will reflect on that axis line we put through the middle. Okay, if we click OK, it's just going to reflect the object, but if we hit copy, it will duplicate it. So we've got one of each. If I just zoom in to tidy this up, so I'm now going to use the scissors tool, and the shortcut for that is C. It's hidden now on the palette. This will, using the snapping tool, if I then click on the intersect line, that should cut that line at that point, so I can delete that. And again, C to bring up the scissors. Oops, telling me I've not got one selected here, so V to bring up my selection tool, and then C for the scissors. Okay, select and delete. I think that should do it. It's a nice kind of simple vector shape that we can start cutting up in the next part. So now we've created our base shape in Illustrator. The next stage is to take it into Photoshop so we can start doing some kind of manipulation with it. The easiest way to do that is to draw a bounding box around it and then copy it to the clipboard. So Control C, or obviously edit in the copy menu. Okay, and I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. I've got this kind of generic hipstery type background that I took from Unsplash. Any kind of image will work for this, but I find it's worked best with sort of landscape shots with lots of kind of texture and detail in there. Okay, so the next step is to turn it into a smart object. There's two reasons for doing this. One is that you should always turn your objects into a smart object if you can. It kind of helps for a non-destructive workflow, and also if you're scaling up and down at a later stage, then you get better results with this. The other reason is that we could then change the image and affect the whole layout without having to redo everything from scratch. Okay, so I turn it into a smart object. Okay, so right clicking on it and convert to smart object. You'll know that it's a smart object because you'll have a little a little page with I think it's a corner folded down as an icon, and that shows that you've got a nested smart object in there. Okay, so with that done, we can then paste our object in. And again, if we keep this set to smart objects, which should be the default, so that was just Control V to bring that into Photoshop. Okay, it's kind of there, it's a bit hard to make out because it's black and a little bit small at the moment, so we're going to scale up. If you hold down the Shift key as you drag the bounding box, it'll keep everything in proportion. I'm going to hit Enter to apply that. Okay, so if we then go to Layer, Style and Colour Overlay, you can see it's red at the moment. I'm going to make this white. Okay, that's a bit easier to see now. I'm just going to sort out the alignment, so if I hit Control and A, that will draw a bounding box around my entire canvas. And then if I select the move arrow, and then this centre line here, I'll position it in the centre, and likewise there. So that's the vertical and the horizontal alignment sorted. Okay, so with this in place, we're now ready to start cutting up the image. I'm just going to rename this. It's always good practice to name your layers as you go to stop it becoming some kind of Inception style mess of layers within layers. Okay, so the first step is to select the Magic Wand tool. Make sure this is set to contiguous. Okay, if it isn't, then it will select all of the areas with the same colour, and because we're dealing with transparency, that's basically going to be the entire canvas. So if we make sure that's selected, and then choose our first area to work with. So I'm going to choose this area here, and you can see that the Magic Wand tool has cut out that triangle inside. So now I need to duplicate my initial layer, and then it's as simple as hitting the mask button, which is this kind of washing machine shaped icon at the bottom there. Okay, and you can see it's made a mask for me. Now I'm going to unlink this mask so that if I then move the layer about, make sure you've selected this layer now rather than the mask layer. If I then move using my move tool, the mask stays in place but the image itself moves. Okay, so what we're going for here is some kind of contrast in the shot. You want to be able to see a difference between the image around it and the image inside that area. So something like that should work. Okay, and then I'm going to relink it. So we're going to repeat this step a few times. So select another area. I'm going to leave this one as is. I'm going to change this one. So again, if you hold down the Alt key and drag up, that will duplicate this layer. And then create a mask. So again, you won't see anything to start with. But if you then unlink it and select the Move tool, the shortcut for the Move tool is the V key. Okay, we're just going to... I just moved the mask there by mistake, so I'll undo that. I'm going to move that layer again. Let's see what we can find that looks interesting. So we could bring a bit of horizon in there. That's quite an interesting effect. We're going to relink again. So we're just going to carry on using the Magic Wand tool to select an area. And selecting the bottom layer, holding the Alt key and duplicating, and creating a mask. Linking that mask. And moving the layer to create a bit of contrast in the image. I'm just going to pause the video and do the next few stages so you're not watching me working through all of it. We're only going to focus on half of the shape because we're going to duplicate it, save ourselves some time. So I'll pause the video and pick it up again in a second. Okay, so I've spent a couple of minutes and created half of my image now. So I should have a bunch of layers down here. It's important to check that you've turned on the link between your layers again. So I've got one left to do, it's just a case of clicking on that gap in the middle. The next thing I'm going to do is group all of these layers, not like that. So click on the top layer, hold down the shift key and click down and it will select all the layers there. Then if you use the shortcut Control G or Command G, and it will group them into a new folder. Okay, and if I turn that off you can see that I've got all my layers selected. I'm then going to hold down the Alt key and duplicate the entire group. So hold down Alt and drag up. We'll rename this right hand side. And then hopefully if I go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, it's going to duplicate everything and flip it to the right. Okay, so it's then just a case of lining it up. Held down the Shift key as I drag then to keep everything in line. Okay, so if I just turn off the shape as well, you can see that even on its own it kind of works okay. Got a slight alignment issue there, I'm just going to give it a couple of taps over. There we go, it's looking better. Okay, so I'm finding that the white line is a little bit too heavy, but if I turn it off, it's a bit flat, you kind of lose the contrast. So one option would be to drop the opacity, so you get it kind of bedded in a bit more, and that works pretty well. My preferred approach would be to put a soft light blending mode on. Now the problem is, because we've got a colour overlay, when I use a blending mode you're not going to notice any difference, and that's because Photoshop renders the colour overlay after it's done the lighting effects, so it kind of overrides it. The workaround for this is to put this into a group. So Control G to group it, and the only object that we'll have in there is the white shape. Okay, so I'm going to name this symbol, and then if I set this to soft light, you'll see that it affects the image. And then I'm going to duplicate that because I'd like double the intensity there. In fact, I'm going to change my mind and use an overlay instead, and that's given me a more interesting effect because it's interacting with the texture behind it. The only thing left to do on this is to add some kind of interesting text. Could be song lyrics, some motivational design quote, something about making lots of money seems to be pretty popular on t-shirts. So I'm going to drag a text box into the centre and set it to central justification. I'm using the Knockout font. I find for this a thin condensed font works well, but with a big leading and kerning attached to it. Okay, so the tracking for this is set to 400. Again, have a play with the values and see what works for you. Okay, so something like that works for me. I'm going to centre align it again, so select your entire canvas with Control A, and then use your align tool there. I'll put it in the centre. I'm going to scale it up, holding down the Alt and Shift key to scale in proportion. It's just a case of moving it into a position that works. Okay, so something like that works for me. Completely meaningless, but looks pretty cool. It's ready to go onto a t-shirt or poster or wherever. Okay, so this stage is optional, but I wanted to kind of create a more vintage Instagram type effect on this. Okay, so the way to do that is to flatten the colours slightly, and I'll do that using the curve tool. So you create a new adjustment layer from the pop-out menu at the bottom, the little kind of yin-yang symbol. Make sure it's underneath the text but above everything else, so you might need to drag it up and down the stack. Okay, now we've got an RGB value, and if I drag the curve up and down, you can kind of adjust the contrast. But what I'd like to do is affect each colour channel individually, so if you click on the drop down, and I'm going to take out some red. So if I drag from the centre down, it takes it out. If I drag up, it puts it in. So if we have a little play around, and then change it to green, it'll only need to be subtle kind of tweaks here. So I'm going to put in some more green, and I think I'm going to take out the blue. Okay, so it's kind of flattened it off, made it a little bit more kind of grungy. I can turn on and off the adjustment and play with the opacity to decide where the kind of sweet spot is for that. I'm just going to move my text slightly as well, so see if I can get that to sit a bit better. Okay, so as one final step, remember how we turned this into a smart object at the start and then duplicated this one layer for all of our other layers. If we then make an adjustment to this smart object, it will affect everything else that we've duplicated from it. So we could change this background image if we decide it's not working, or if we needed to produce a whole bunch of these. We can quickly do it rather than starting from scratch. So to edit the smart object, just double click on the thumbnail, bring up this dialog box warning about the fact that you'll need to save your smart object to see the changes. So hit OK on that. So I'm going to bring in another image from Unsplash. This doesn't quite fit our canvas, so I'm going to scale it up. These kind of images with more symmetry in will work better than an asymmetrical image as well. Okay, so with that in place, if I then hit the close button to save it, and then hit the yes on the dialog box. Now my aging laptop's going to take a while to do this. Hopefully yours will be a lot faster than this. Okay, and it's all updated now. So you can see that it's recreated the effect using a different image, so you can play around and find one that works really well for you. So the last couple of optional steps that you may or may not need to do depending on how your design's looking. My text is getting a bit lost in here now, so we could either change the colour or we could put a big soft drop shadow on, which is what I'm going to do here. So if we select the layer and then go to layer, layer style, and choose drop shadow, and then we're going to set the size to be much bigger, and also the spread, so we don't want it to appear too obvious, so you can always drop the opacity as well. So I'll play around to get settings that work for you. I like to have quite a big size so that it's not as obviously affecting the image. Okay, I'm just going to drop my opacity back a bit. And something else that I'm going to do to just try and make the image a bit more interesting is duplicate my symbol group. So Alt and click that layer up, and then if I hit Control and T to transform, then hold the Alt and Shift key together whilst clicking on the corner, so it'll scale in proportion, and I can bring in another version of that shape. Kind of get a bit more going on, so I might back the opacity off a little bit. Likewise on this shape. Just play around with the settings until we get it looking how we want it to. I don't think I actually managed to apply my drop shadow there for some reason. Because I'm still not happy with this, I'm just going to adjust the spacing between the text. So if I select it all using Control A, and then bring up my text dialog box, clicking on that little icon up there, I'm just going to reduce the spacing between my lines of text, something like that. There's a bug on this version on the PC, so I'm going to enter it by hand. Let's go for 250, maybe 350. That looks about right. Yep, that's definitely working better for me. and because it feels like text is still getting a bit lost, I'm going to create a brightness contrast layer as well, same way we made the curves one, clicking on a little symbol down there and choosing brightness contrast, and I'm just going to drop both values on the slider. And there we go, that's kind of reading a bit better. Again, have a play with this until you get the result that you're happy with. You've got a finished geometric hipster t-shirt type design ready to sell on a very cool clothing website for far too much money. So I'm going to leave the tutorial here.